call the northeast wing.
Don't even think about it.
Not to be confused with the Mysterious Mondays, it's the Secret Saturdays, Beasts of the Fifth Sun. That sounds pretty epic. So this game was released in late 2009 for the Nintendo Wii, the Nintendo DS, the PSP, and the PlayStation 2 in 2009. And yes, I find it ridiculous that major licensed games are still being published on the PlayStation 2 and that people are still buying them. And to clarify, because a lot of you seem to miss this point, the reason that's ridiculous is because the PS2 is old. It's the definition of ridiculous that that system is still getting new releases almost a decade after its launch. That's not making fun of the PS2, that's giving it credit. I mean, it takes a huge market share to sustain that kind of long-term software support. I don't make fun of consoles, I make fun of games and modern animation. Nonetheless, Beasts of the Fifth Sun is based on the Cartoon Network action cartoon, The Secret Saturdays. This is a cartoon I have never watched, partly because I am a serious animation snob, and because I'm not 12. So I don't really have much context here, but from what I can tell, what is this? This is it's like Ben 10 with monsters instead of aliens. But that said, this stuff actually does look a bit better. There's a subtle nod to old Hanna-Barbera in the show's style, particularly the action cartoons they did in the 1960s. Now, it's not exactly Space Ghost or anything, but it's really not as bad as most of the modern action cartoons I've seen on the Cartoon Network. And it actually does come across okay in the game's cel-shaded look. You'll no doubt notice I haven't said a thing about the gameplay yet, and that's because there's not a whole lot I could say about The Secret Saturdays, Beasts of the Fifth Sun that you couldn't tell for yourself just by watching. This is a very simple game for a very young audience, mashing together lots of different gameplay conventions and watering them down for the rated E10 audience. So Beasts of the Fifth Sun is basically a 2.5D platformer, but it also has a lot of elements that are characteristic of 3D beat-em-ups. The levels give you a series of platforming sections, only to break them up with small 3D arenas, where you engage in the same beat-em-up action that defines so many of these licensed games.
They'll think twice before messing with us again.
The platforming isn't terrible, but it isn't going to blow your mind either. There are a couple of sections that are surprisingly tricky given the audience, and that's a nice little touch. There doesn't seem to be any penalty for dying, but the fact that you can is actually a welcome change of pace from the modern hold-your-hand game design trends. But the fighting, though, that's where this game really drops the ball. The platforming is actually enjoyable, however relative that may be, but the fighting is just terrible. You mash buttons, actually mash button, until that handful of enemies just goes away. And at least to the game's credit, they do eventually go away. Another problem is that the levels never really evolve. Each one has the same basic structure and design elements as the prior, the only difference being the visual theme. So you're just doing the same thing repeatedly in the same place that just looks different. Again, this is a very simple game. But that's not to say it's a bad game. It's actually somewhere in between bad and average. Precisely the kind of vanilla game these licensed efforts so often turn out to be. The Secret Saturdays, Beasts of the Fifth Sun is a game for fans of the cartoon. For everyone else, this is a secret you won't want to be in on.